Jeremy, thanks very much for coming on. I'm really, really excited about having you here, and I know that the listeners of Northern Vibe are going to be really, really keen to hear your story.
Thank you. Glad to be on.
Yeah. Not as happy as I am, I assure you. Now, look, you've got an incredible story to tell, and obviously, we're here to talk about specific issues that you've got considerable personal experience on, but I kind of want to make the acknowledgement that it's more than just about that. So first thing, I'm just going to ask you to tell me a little bit about the work you do now, which I understand is with disabled people. Would you mind telling me about that?
Yeah, I work with just the one client in my job. So yeah, it's a job I just work part-time at, like 1.5 days a week, with a bit of admin thrown in as well. So it's enough to live on.
The paperwork. There's always paperwork. And you're from Denmark in Western Australia, which appears to be, because I've done a little bit of research there, appears to be a genuinely beautiful part of the world. Mate, can you tell me about Denmark?
Well, it's basically the south coast of WA. It's just about the coolest climate that I could find in this part of Australia. So I originally come from England, so I like that. I can't stand the heat, basically.
Oh, fair dinkum. So I wasn't aware of that. What county you from?
Yorkshire.
Bradford. Oh, you're a northerner.
Yeah.
Oh, Scows, isn't it?
No, the other side of the Pennines.
Oh, that's Manx. That's what they say, isn't it? And you've lost the accent, so like you obviously been here for a while.
Yeah, most of my life. Yeah.
Oh, right. There we go. Oh, there we go. A good northern boy. Things you learn on Northern Vibe. So look, what we'll do is, with your permission, I'd like to dive into. I'm just going to kind of like make a statement, and I really want to get your take on this, because I have been researching this quite a bit, and clearly I don't have anywhere near your experience, but it's a case of me drawing out what you think and getting your opinion on stuff. Now, and I'm going to have to do, and the other thing, I'm going to have to apologise to both you and our listeners. I'm going to have to do a little bit of reading, because some of these concepts are pretty complex. So I want to kind of get it right. Now, for a lot of these discussions, something that a lot of advocates have missed is this: that if people really do have a deep-seated identity that's not biologically based, then we're more than material beings. Discussion about true identity disassociated from material biology really is a discussion about the human soul, Jeremy. And I'd really like your take on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would like to believe that that was a factor involved in the transgender movement, but I think they get around it a bit by claiming that it is biology, that it's seated in the brain. So we're back to materialistic science again, with the way most people approach it, I think. But yeah, what you're saying could be valid.
I think, anytime we start talking about stuff like this, there really is that implication, and yes, there is going to be that materialist argument that there is just something going, that there's stuff going on in the brain. But again, you can never really, ultimately, it's going to come down to, that's still something material. And if there is a consciousness and an idea of self that transcends merely what's going on in the brain, which ultimately I can't see them getting around that argument. So there really is, I can see in the long term, if this argument is ended up taken seriously rather than dismissed out of hand, I can see that argument developing, and it will be very interesting to see how that evolves. But look, that leads me into a question. Look, how kind of scientifically now let me rephrase this. I've done some reading about how scientifically identity is ascertained. And the paper that I've kind of like looked at is, I'm gonna quote the give me one moment because I know people are going to pull me up on this, is Devita Singh's paper from 2012, a follow-up study of boys with gender identity disorder. And I'll put it on I'll put it on Facebook when it comes up. Now, the way I kind of read that is, to really, really paraphrase, if someone is insistent and persistent about saying that that's who they are, that's pretty much how it's ascertained. In your experience, is that the case? Can you tell me?
Well, yeah, that's the standard how they judge if someone is trans. So basically, that leaves it up to the individual to demonstrate to the clinician that they're pretty sure of what's going on. So that can lead to problems because, I mean, many trans people are on the autism spectrum. So that tends to make people very rigid in their thinking and pretty obsessive. So if they are attached to a particular idea, they will demonstrate to anybody that that is definitely true. But then, yeah, problems come later when there's a couple of issues involved in this diagnosis because they don't tend to look for other causes. So what happens is there may be many causes, like in my case, which I'll get to, but could be trauma, could be inappropriate child rearing from a parent, putting ideas into kids' heads. The other cases of sudden onset gender dysphoria, which is often socially driven. This whole kind of idea that people can be swept up in a kind of social contagion. So there's many factors, but the gender clinicians, because of their own guidelines, aren't really geared towards digging in and finding out what's the actual cause in this instance.
And that's all, already we've gone off my kind of like list of questions, which is fantastic. What are those guidelines, Jeremy? Can you kind of like tell me about that?
Well, basically, normally they're just, you have to prove that this is going to be persistent. So normally they would require a life test to show that this is going to be a long-term prospect. You're not going to just change your mind in several months. But in practice, it doesn't actually work out that way either, because, so for example, in my case, and in many people's case, their idea that they have to go through counselling for 2 years before they're accepted just doesn't happen. I had one session with a psychologist and several sessions with a psychiatrist, but he wasn't keen on putting me on hormones. So what happened was, he had previous clients that he helped transition, but then they went ahead and later committed suicide. So he was reluctant to help anyone else to transition. And I was getting quite frustrated. And so I went to see a different psychiatrist, and then I just was able to get on hormones straight away.
Okay.
So
you kind of went doctor shopping. Would that be correct?
That's right, exactly. Yeah. And trans people would broadcast what the best doctors are, so they would know who to go to get the most affirming physician. Yeah.
Right. Well, look, that's kind of, you've actually, I'm going to read out some of the, from this dissertation that I had there. I'm just going to read some of this out and just get you to comment as you see fit. In Davida Singh's dissertation, she points out that if it were possible to know with certainty whether a child with gender dysphoria will persist or desist, then the clinical approach could be modified to match that child's need. But as you indicated, insistent, persistent, and consistent was the way to tell whether or not people, including children incidentally, who were actually trans from potential future desisters. But Singh also notes in her dissertation, and this is from, I think it's about page 179, 180, and if I've got the page numbers wrong, I'm happy to stand corrected on that. There is an extreme lack of the sorts of careful long-term studies required to understand why some people, including children, desist and others don't. Now, while there are some early emerging evidence that the severity of childhood gender dysphoria can predict persistence, she quotes in her research that people who exhibited rather severe gender dysphoria early later went on to desist. So let's look at the implications of that. So we're talking about life-changing surgery that people will do when it's not that it's unscientific, it's just that the science is early. Like we don't know. And we're kind of like, well, you know, there seems to be a big push. All of a sudden, this is something that's never really happened before in human history. And then all of a sudden we've got, large numbers of people deciding that the sex that they were born in isn't the sex that they are.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that if someone goes to get treatment for gender confusion, and once they're put on that path, so for example, you could be a child and you might go on puberty blockers, and what tends to happen is once they go on hormones, the desistance level is quite low, and I think that's a part of the fact that it's a self-fulfilling kind of treatment. So when you take hormones, especially of the opposite sex, it does make you feel differently. So then it kind of affirms your new gender identity in a way. But earlier studies that show that people who are treated conservatively and just left to their own devices, in effect, there's a massive amount of people that just naturally grow out of it and become happy with their biological sex. The vast majority.
So why is there this reluctance, or at least apparent reluctance, Jeremy, on the part of the medical establishment, at least, for people to just watch and wait? Well, why?
Because it's ideologically driven. The lobby groups have impacted the medical profession so much that it's very difficult to do any dissenting studies or dissenting science. So what happens is,
it just ends up being circular and a self-fulfilling prophecy. I can kind of see that. And look, I think there's this other idea of what I could kind of call false neutrality. And what I mean by that is this: children and young adults and human beings, but especially children, we're always watching our peers. So children are watching adults, obviously, and we as kind of grown-ups, we're watching our peers and broader society to see if our behaviour is validated or punished. So if you see little boys start dressing up as girls and you do nothing, the idea that that's neutral and you're not doing anything, that's kind of not the case. Arguably, you're reinforcing the behaviour. You know what I mean? It's okay. You can kind of do that. And really, this is such a complicated thing because it's wrapped up also. Really, one of the other really big debates behind this that I can see is that it's an argument that's really never been fixed up between the idea of nature and nurture and the dance between those two and which one has more impact at which time. And we're still kind of playing out that's been happening really since as long as psychology has been around.
Well, that's a good point, because I've been thinking a lot about that. Like in our culture in previous years, like when I was a kid, a lot of this kind of issue was frowned upon. The idea that you could be a different sex or anything like that. And I think that accounted for a less amount of people that were doing that, because it was less acceptable. But now that it's become more socially acceptable, that would account for a larger amount of people doing that. And that's a really good point, what you said. Because people are curious about why there's a massive explosion of this. And it's being really pushed in society that, yeah, you can be whatever you want to be, express yourself. The kind of Judeo-Christian kind of beliefs, moral system is kind of been squashed a lot in our society. So that is starting to become more of a fringe instead of the normal baseline. So yeah, that has impacted.
Here's the thing, and I'm going to have to get theological and philosophical. And again, I'm really interested in your take on this, because I know that you're a very well-read chap and you've got considerable experience behind it. I see this as an actual distortion in some ways of the Judeo-Christian message. And here's why. Fundamentally, the way I understand Judeo-Christianity is it is this pull in the same kind of way. It's like, well, okay, your default setting is sin. That's your kind of material. That's who you are. You're a bit of a beast. You want to go out. You want to eat lots of food. You want to get power. You want to own your enemies. You want women. You want all this kind of stuff. But by the same token, in your material body is the Spirit of God, and you were made in His Creator. So it's up to you, using your free will, to choose which one of those is the more authentic you, and then go on this self-fulfilling prophecy. Go on this path and whichever one you take seems to become self-sustaining in a certain degree. You choose what you want to be. Do you want to be a child of, I don't want to say of the earth, because that kind of sounds too, but do you want to be a child of materialism? Do you want to be purely of the earth, or do you want to recognize your ultimate spiritual nature, who you authentically really are? That's why I can see parts of the Judeo-Christian narrative and the Judeo-Christian ideas in this. It's an appeal to authenticity, to your authentic nature. You know what I mean? I don't see this as a rejection. That's what I was kind of getting at the beginning. Strangely, I don't see this argument as a rejection of Judeo-Christianity, in the sense that I see it as like saying, we're recognizing that Judeo-Christianity, that the thought behind that had a point, and it's real, it's right, it's correct. We're going to reframe it completely. It's a reframing it's a reframing of the hypothesis, and a reframing of the ideas, rather than a rejection of the pattern of reality that Judeo-Christianity recognized, that there is this tussle between the material self and the spiritual self, the soul. And there is a question as to what your authentic identity is. They're trying to reframe it. They're trying to actually hijack it, rather than saying, no, that's just complete codswallop. They're kind of saying, well, there's a degree of truth to that, but it's not going towards God. That's not what it is. It's exactly this other way. What do you think about that? Like,
well, my answer to that would be that sin begets sin. So once you go down a sinful path, it's very easy just to keep sinning. And you could go, yeah. Problem is, in this day and age where the morals are about do as thou wilt and kind of please yourself. A lot of the checks and balances that were in Christianity that helped keep a cohesive society are slowly starting to break down, and they still have I think they still have a hold on our collective consciousness. because it's a really obviously a powerful and it's a good idea. The golden rule, do unto others as you had them do unto you. It makes perfect sense. But with relativism increasing all the time, kind of as each generation passes, I can see that getting worse and worse over time. And yeah, causing a kind of a fundamental kind of breakdown in society.
Yeah. But and here's and we've gone. Well, it's not off topic really. It's all interrelated. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm just interested in your take on this. Something is dying in society right now. That's clear. I don't know exactly what, but we're going through a massive revolution, and things are flipping on their head. Some people are saying that Judeo-Christianity is dying, and that may be the case. But the way I think of Judeo-Christianity is that it's not just a set of ideas. I used to think of it in that way. It's like a set of hypotheses that we put forward, like, love one another as I have loved you. Look at the link between, work out the link between your authentic identity and your material being, all of these things. Yeah, I get that. There are some ideas behind that, but I actually now see it more of a pattern of reality. So let's look at the life of Christ. Like you've got him, his ascent. So he got really strong. Then he gets crucified, which kind of wasn't good. Then you've got a descent into the tomb. And then you've got this hiatus. And then you have a rebirth. That's a pattern of reality. And if it's true that there really is a God, and if it's true that Jesus really was his son, and if it's true that he really did die, and if it's true that he really rose again, well, that's a pattern of reality. What God was trying to show us through the life of Christ was a pattern of reality. And what Christ was trying to demonstrate to us is going, look, this is a pattern of reality. This is how things play out. It's not, it's not just this bunch of ideas you've got to kind of like strive for. That's part of it, but there's more to it than that. I think it's the case, especially with, because, we're both Catholics. Our church has done, and I mean this as a very respectful member of the church. In fact, the surname Moloney means servant of the church. That's how close it is to my identity. Mate, we've done a rubbish job, a really, really rubbish job in the past, I would say 50, maybe even longer, 70 years of demonstrating Christ to the rest of the world. And as one of my friends actually articulated it to me, who I was discussing this with one day, he goes, look, Moloney, you got to understand, I kind of want to be a Christian. There was some ideas that he couldn't kind of like get over. He couldn't take a leap of faith. He goes, but the other thing is, he goes, where's this transformation that you guys talk about all the time? Where is it? Where is it in you? Where is it in society? And he's right. Like that was a kind of game, set, and match moment. Now, it's true that we have had these magnificent transformations in the past. So you've had, again, this pattern of reality. It's like, things have gone really bad in society, and then we've remembered who we are. Then we've remembered Christ, and we've remembered everything. So you've had this pattern of reality reestablishing itself, birth, death, hiatus, rebirth.
Yeah, we've seen that in the past with, for example, like Saint Dominic, who was given the rosary, and it was at a time when there was a lot of faithlessness in society in the Middle Ages. So, and that actually had a great boost and impacted society in a very big way. But only 100 years later, people already started to fall away from the faith, and another saint came along and re-instigated it. And this is the kind of thing where I think certain holy people in history come in at a time when it's needed and reinvigorate the faith. So yeah, I think that what you're saying is true.
Yeah, and look, that's what I'm seeing. So when I'm talking to my, and I actually know a Satanist, who I kind of like, I speak to occasionally. Well, he claims he's a Satanist. Sometimes I think I'm really not sure what he thinks. Sometimes I think he's claiming it to be tongue in cheek. Sometimes I think he's kind of being serious because he does get like, there's a degree of bitterness in him, and like some, he's kind of pissed off with the world, and that does flare up. But in the same way that being a Satanist, you have to, like, he's not an atheist. He doesn't think that God doesn't exist. He's against God. So in the same way that being against God shows his existence and like does not deny his existence, in the same way, all these things that are happening that kind of seem to be going against us, really, in the same way that night gives day meaning, I genuinely think that that's what's happening now. And there's a real underground movement. It's both in the intellectual dark web, which I know both you and I, do kind of follow a little bit. I'm a great fan of Jordan Peterson, of course. He is a real St. John the Baptist. He's a real John the Baptist figure. And then you've got guys like Jonathan Peugeot, who's in the Orthodox Church, a church that I respect deeply. He's kind of, mate, there's some magnificent work that's been doing there. And if someone had told you like 15 years ago that a weird psychologist who is having a crisis of faith, that his crisis of faith would be played out over the entire Western world, and an obscure Orthodox icon carver from Montreal would have like a following of like in the millions of people watching him on podcasts and YouTube, like you'd have laughed.
Yeah.
You would have laughed out loud. And yet here we are, we're going through that, I kind of think we're in the tomb. I kind of think we're in the tomb. And, Sunday's coming. Initially I felt really, really concerned about all of this, but I kind of see it now, through the pattern kind of thing. I'm kind of seeing it very different. Now, it appears that we've gone off on a tangent, but I just want to say that this is linked, because really there are very deep religious motifs, very deep religious arguments behind the transgender discussion. And again, it comes down to this concept that Jeremy and I have discussed. So if some of you out there were wondering, it's like, what has this got to do with it? It's about the pattern. It's about recognizing what's going on. And it's about understanding that this argument is actually reaffirming a Christian motif, a Judeo-Christian motif, and a Judeo-Christian pattern of reality. But mate, if you feel comfortable doing so, Jeremy, I'd really like you to lead us through your personal experience. So like, through your upbringing, journey as coming out as gay, your first trans surgery, and then, from female to male and then coming back to male, and mate, walk us through.
Yeah, well, from age 5, I felt like I was confused about my gender. It was something I always kept to myself. It was something I was ashamed of. I didn't share it with anybody. And it was something that I wanted to get rid of, basically, these feelings. And as I grew up, as I went through puberty, I had this kind of I was obviously male. My body was male. And I knew there was nothing I could do about that. And in some ways, I was quite happy with it. But in other ways, there was this other thing inside of me that was kept on saying, no, I was supposed to be a girl. It's not right. And it was like a war going inside of me, basically. So it caused me a lot of problems. And then there was other things as well that weren't connected to that, like the autism, that I didn't actually end up getting diagnosed till 2 years ago. And I actually went back through all my life, and it's like so much things made sense well before they didn't, because all the traits that I was experiencing, I just thought I was insane or something. I didn't know what else to name it. But when I actually finally got the diagnosis, everything made perfect sense. But anyway, so these feelings just persisted. I grew up, I had a relationship, I had 2 kids, and they never went away. They kept coming back. And eventually I read in a book, searching for answers, what I thought was going on. And I saw the definition of a transsexual. I thought, wow, that must be me. So through kind of, exploring that and eventually going to see a psychologist and saying, I think I'm a transsexual, but I'm not really sure. And I'm a bit disturbed by it because I don't want to go against nature. And she said, what about going against your own nature? And that kind of affirmed me and made sense to me at the time. So eventually I started to move towards transition, and that was in my mid-30s. And I went through the whole process with surgery in 2003 and lived for a total of 20 years as a transgender woman. What made me detransition? I eventually started questioning everything I thought I knew, from science to politics. Started reading dissenting scientists, and eventually started questioning the transgender science. Started looking at people who had dissenting views on that. And from that point, I was like, nah, this is not right. So I straight away detransitioned. 3 months later, came back to the church. And yeah, and that was just over 2 years ago.
Wow. Mate, the first thing I've got to say is it's kind of a powerful story. And seriously, mate, thanks for sharing. But
here's the clincher. It's like, it was only when I detransitioned is that I found out why I had those feelings all my life, because the penny dropped and I realized that my mum had taken this drug, DES, diethylstilbestrol. It's an anti-miscarriage drug that was given to millions of women between the 1940s and the 1970s. And it's a powerful estrogen.
Oh.
They found that 20% of boys that were subject to this drug in the womb had gender identity issues.
Wow.
So to me, that's no surprise, and it shouldn't be a surprise because they had done experiments on rats in the 1930s with synthetic estrogens and noticed that the behavior of male rats became typically female after being given doses of estrogen when they were in the womb. So I don't even think that I think the people that were responsible for doing this would have known what the impact was. How could they not have?
Fill a little mine.
It's a part of the mass feminization of males, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know you've spoken about that. And I kind of want to discuss that a bit more, but again, look, anytime you feel uncomfortable, Jeremy, like you just go, I don't want to discuss it or whatever it is.
No problem.
So, I'm going to ask some pretty personal questions, and we quite understand that if it's an area you don't want to walk. But like, I kind of, everyone understands what it's like to not fit in at some place at some point in time. And I kind of like, I get that too. Like I didn't have a real good time at school for reasons which we need not go into here. but feeling that way all of the time, like that just must have been a nightmare as a kid. Like, how was your childhood? Like, was it tough? Like, you know?
Well, in some ways it was normal. We travelled around a lot as a family, different parts of England, and then coming over to Australia when I was 8 years old. In some ways I was able to kind of put it aside in a way, and it's almost like it came up at certain times when you can imagine almost like an addiction. Say for example, you've got a gambling addiction, you've got it under control. You might go for a couple of years without feeling like you need to go and gamble, but then it will just suddenly come up just out of the blue, and then you just kind of have real struggle for several months with it or something like that. And then you'll get it under control again, and then another year passes and before it comes up again. So yeah, that's what it felt like for me.
Gosh, mate. So you said you had kids. So did you get married, or was it like a?
No, just a partnership.
Just a partnership. Okay.
We weren't practicing Christians, and I was basically a pagan for most of my life since I dropped away from the church at about age 16.
Yeah. Oh, you're not alone. Yeah, we've all lived as a pagan at some point in time. I think Augustine is known for saying, "Make me good, God, but not yet." Day after tomorrow, maybe. we all get that. But so, like, how did your kids handle this? Like, you know, what are they?
Well, they seemed to take it in their stride when I came out as a trans, and I don't know. I guess it wasn't that as widely known back in the 90s as it is now, but it's not like I was really estranged. I mean, I had broken up from my partner just before then, so there was kind of like, there was issues around that, and then I kind of lived away for a couple of years, and that was kind of problematic. But yeah, when I kind of came back to being a man, they were kind of very happy about that too. So, and this has been a common thing with my family, is like for the most part, everyone's been accepting of both changes for the most part.
See, that does raise. I really do want to come back to that. You know, that intensely personal story, and like, you know, how your ex handled it, and how your kids handle it, and all that kind of stuff. But really, I've discussed this with a friend who's got a relative who's having those sorts of issues, and this person got really angry with me and kind of said, well, you know, firstly, who are you to question what that person thinks about themselves? And that's a good argument, like, really, because it comes down to, I mean, the funny thing is there are people willing to diagnose something and give people drugs to kind of say, yeah, that's true. You know, I can say because of those three words, you know, this has been, you know, insistent, persistent, and consistent. Yes, let's make this happen. So there are people out there kind of willing to do it. But when someone like me goes, well, I don't know. I mean, I kind of wonder if it's the right thing to do to encourage people to do that sort of stuff, which leads to the question is, what really is supporting someone who's going through this issue? Is supporting them going, yes, go your hardest, go and do this? Or is supporting them going, you know, maybe you kind of shouldn't? I actually had another discussion, to put it in another context, I think, which might make it a little bit easier for both of us to discuss. I had a friend who was seriously suicidal and articulated on in a public forum, on a form of social media, that they were feeling suicidal and that they were thinking of killing themselves, and what, you know, what do you think? And this person, to give some further contextual information, this person had some pretty serious medical issues and still has them. That person's still with us, thank God. And was going through some really serious pain, like has got a serious pain problem, like it's serious persistent pain. It's never going to go away. And ultimately this disease is going to claim that person. There's no question about that. I wasn't going to touch that with a 10-foot pole initially, but I noticed all these people were going, yeah, you should do that. We'll be drinking at your funeral. Yeah, that's great. And I went there and went, you know what, I'm going to weigh in. And I tried to contact that person to speak to them kind of personally, but I got the impression, without going into the precise details of how and why, but I got the impression that this person wanted to discuss it on the open forum. I said, okay. I went, you know what? No, it's a bad idea. Like, it's better. The world is a better place that you're here. You've got a kind of duty in spite of your suffering. I don't like to use the word duty, actually. I think that it's healthy for you and healthy for the world that in spite of your suffering, you've got a degree of gratitude for being here, and that you understand that your presence has meaning and point. So no. And these people turned on me. They were like, who the hell are you? And I'm like, seriously, some of these people started messaging me with like, you're just a bad person. You're seriously, and like, things like, not just like, oh, I disagree with you. Like, you're evil. There's something wrong with you. Why wouldn't you validate that? And I'm going, I don't think you've seen what's happened here. The person has articulated suicidal, is as idealized suicide, has indicated they want to do it. And maybe that this is a cry for help for you to say, how about you stay with us? Stay with me for a while. Your presence is worthwhile. And somehow I ended up being the bad person.
It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, but like, I always try and steel man, like, I can kind of see where they're coming from. These people, it goes back to, the point that I was going to kind of raise, and I assure you there is a point. What's support? What is supporting a person that is going through a difficult, challenging time like this? What is the nature
I've seen that before with people thinking that it's okay to agree that someone should kill themselves. And a lot of it comes from, well, it doesn't come from Christian morality, obviously. And in this day and age, if you're like, so many people are just like, think the material reality is it, that's all we have. So for them, life and death doesn't mean what it means for people who know that there is an afterlife. I think it's crazy. But the people around me, I would have preferred if they were more insistent in saying, no, it's a bad idea. You can't change sex. You are what you are. You've just got to find a way to deal with it. I would have hated them saying that. I would have, possibly not wanted to talk to them. But looking back, I would have actually preferred that. Someone just taking a strong stance. And I tell people to take a strong stance. Parents who are struggling with children that are in the process of disowning them because they don't want to affirm their gender identity. It's a terrible situation. But in my opinion, it's the better thing to do to stick to your guns and say, no, you can't change sex. That's not even possible because we are our biological reality. We need to accept that. Hopefully later, those people will wake up and they will be thankful that someone had that attitude around them. That's the way I look at it. Again,
it can be totally supportive to say, you know what, no, that's a support.
Exactly.
Like, no, you shouldn't do that. It's funny how using the negative imperative in almost any circumstance nowadays is seen as bad and wrong and all that. Mate, again, and if you're not like, so were you gay while you were you trans, or did you still have attraction towards women? Like, what?
Yeah, I was still attracted to women, so that never stopped. So I was a trans lesbian, so-called.
Okay. Right.
And I was in a relationship for 9 years as well during that time.
Oh, okay. Wow.
With a woman.
Okay. Was she aware of like the full circumstances?
Yeah.
Or? Wow. Are you still friends with that person, may I ask? Or
Kind of on and off. She has difficulty with my political stance now these days.
yeah, you've become a reactionary conservative Catholic. I kind of see. Yeah, I can kind of see. But that's still like, you know, true affection can transcend these things. Like I got a lot of friends who are seriously left of centre, and you know, we've been friends for years. And every now and then I get told to check my privilege. I get told to educate myself. I get told that it's like, well, you know, one of us is on a trust fund, and one of us can walk up and wave their gender identity and their sexual orientation at someone and get a job, and the other one can't. So, you know,
that's right. Who's privileged here?
Yeah, one of them, and you know, one of them kind of written books and run podcasts. Anyway, but, yeah, written articles. But yeah, so no, I kind of get where that comes from, and so look, like, you know, coming back surgically, like how long, like what happens, like, you know, what's the process? Do you start taking drugs again, like, you know, what?
Testosterone, yeah, because I'm not
Okay.
able to make my own, so unfortunately.
Oh yeah, for obvious reasons. Yeah, but yeah, mate. So, gosh, yeah, I don't know, mate. That would have to be a difficult kind of, you know, thing though. Again, like, you know, the pain of surgery. How long are you in hospital for? Like, how long does it actually take?
Yeah, I think I was in there for a week. It was the most difficult physical experience of my life, really, going through that. It's pretty amazingly intense surgery. Took a while to recover. It's not the kind of thing that really can be undone. I mean, there are people that do it apparently, but the results probably are questionable. So yeah.
Okay, mate. The other thing I'm really interested in is, and this is, your writing. You got published in the Spectator, which is kind of, I got to say, mate, I'm as jealous as hell there. And just for our readers that aren't aware of what the Spectator is, it's the longest continuously published magazine in the world now. It used to just be in the English language. I think it's up over 200 years, or coming on 200 years. I think 28 was the first publication date. And it's a very well established magazine, and you got published in it. So, mate, tell me about that article and tell me how you being published came about.
Yeah, well, I've got an awesome Catholic friend called James Parker, and he is very big in the ex-homosexual movement. He struggled with homosexuality for years, and he was a great gay activist in his earlier life. So, and after much therapy, he naturally just became heterosexual again, and now is talking against conversion therapy and all that kind of stuff. So what happened was the Spectator was running some articles from ex-homosexuals. So there was a lesbian, ex-lesbian as well, in a series. And James Parker put in a plug for me and said, we've got someone who's an ex-trans, so that would be a good one. So I wrote the article, and yeah, I'm a bit of a bigger picture thinker as well. So I kind of tend to look at the broad scope of issues when I'm writing. So the whole history, the kind of the movements that people think are accidental, the way that society has evolved over the last few generations, I don't see it that way at all. I see it as being deliberately engineered, and there's stacks of evidence for that. So
Yeah.
I don't hold back in talking about those issues.
Yeah, and look, you know, well, See, here's the whole kind of thing. Like when I'm discussing this with people, there is clearly a lot of collusion in society. Like a political party is a collusion. It's a group of people coming together to get, you know, a certain outcome and to influence society. Any activist group is a collusion. And there is actually conspiracies. Like you get, you know, the difference between a collusion and conspiracy is a degree of illegality. So a group of people coming together to say smuggle drugs in Australia, well, that's a conspiracy. That's the kind of legal definition of it. And if people are out to, you know, introduce things in society that are illegal or even not illegal, kind of like arguably, you know, kind of could be and should be to change society completely into a vision that some might find kind of repulsive. Well, that's not a conspiracy. It's a collusion, and some people are covering their tracks to make that happen. Again, we know that regularly both political parties cover their tracks and cover their true agendas. That happens. That can't reasonably be argued anymore. For complete clarity on, you know, I don't believe in the common conspiracy theories that are kind of out there right now, but I do know that people do get together to collude to change society and sometimes use illegal means to do so. But I really want to show your article in case any people kind of like want to have a quick look. So here is Jeremy's article. It's in the Spectator magazine. It's called Sex, Drugs and Gender Dysphoria. If you Google Spectator magazine, Jeremy Bate, you'll find it. It was published on the 9th of January, 2021. It's definitely worth a read, ladies and gentlemen. Have a look. And, you know, I'm getting no money from this. I'm going to plug the Spectator. Spectator is a magnificent magazine and really, really worth kind of having a look at there. But look, we've been going for an hour, Jeremy, and it's been an absolutely magnificent and deeply, deeply personal conversation. And I'm really, really kind of happy that I'm really kind of happy that you've come on board to discuss this. Like I said, we've just flown through this hour. I wouldn't mind wrapping up now, and I promise, because I'm pretty sure we're going to get a fair bit of love from people suggesting that we should get you back on at some later time, and that's highly likely to happen. Mate, is there anything else you quickly want to cover off on before we wrap it up?
Well, for me, a really important issue is when I came back to the Catholic Church, I very quickly realized that there is that things have changed a lot since I was a kid, and I did some digging, and I found a lot of things that made everything that I've been researching make sense. That all these changes that I'm talking about in society, it was pushed earlier on in the church. A modernist infiltration that was, it's almost like they had to get the church first before they started on society, because the church is a huge moral institution that has a great impact on our society as a whole, even though we may not even realize that. But once they got in there and made these changes, there's like stacks of evidence for this. You just have to look up Bella Dodd. She personally recruited about 1,000 homosexuals into seminaries from the 1930s at the request of Stalin, I believe. Communists and Freemasons have got so much in common. They are basically running the same agenda. This is what people got to realize.
Well, see, you know, the moral authority, any place that has a high degree of moral authority is going to be an attractive place to people who want it. And
that's right.
You know, and look, that plays out too. Like when I kind of came back, actually it was reading The Temptation, Christ's Temptation, that kind of brought me back. And it's because I realized that's when I started to really kind of understand the symbology, because just to, you know, I know you know, but for listeners out there, Christ was tempted for 40 days, and after fasting for 40 days and fasting 40 nights, Christ was tempted before he kind of went on his mission. And he was tempted with three things. And basically these things were symbolic of, well, he was tempted first with bread. So that's hunger. That's like, well, what Satan was trying to kind of say then, because Christ was hungry, he tempted him with bread. He said, well, he was being tempted on two levels, both as a human being. It's like you're a hungry guy, but he was also being tempted as a deity, as God. It's like, well, if you can feed these people, they'll follow you anywhere. They'll do anything for bread. So he was being tempted on two levels there. And then there was the second temptation of mystery. So take him to the highest point and throw yourself out. The angels will help you float down. You won't be harmed. Well, that was an appeal too to mystery, because if he had have done that and he had have been caught, and he wouldn't have, because like he would have failed and God would probably have let him fall down. But if he had have done this magic trick in front of everyone and jumped off a building and floated down and flown like Superman, well, people would worship him purely because of the magic. It'd be like, oh, well, look at this amazing magician. He'd be worshipped on that level. And the final appeal was, of course, the sword of authority he was tempted with. He goes, just follow me and everybody will follow you, because I'll give you the authority over dominion over everything on this earth. The sword of Rome was the final temptation. And when I came to understand that Christ was being tempted on both levels, as both a man and someone who wanted to be worshipped, or someone who wanted to show, because he was God, like wanted to show the path to the Father, I started all those, like you, those things just fell into place. So anywhere that does have, the point being that any organization that has a high degree of moral authority is going to tempt people into it like that. But look, mate, it's been a real.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
The church, because of this infiltration, have been presenting to the world that we are to be friendly with the world, and that's been the new way of kind of reaching out to people, I guess. But that to me is a really silly idea, because basically the Catholic Church has always been a moral authority that has stood in opposition to the world, and that gives it the strength, and that strength is attractive, and we shouldn't be afraid to stand in opposition to the world, because that is going to be more attractive than sounding really cool because we're accepting LGBT or something like that.
Yeah, whatever it is. I mean, you marry yourself to fashion, you find yourself a widow very, very, very quickly indeed.
Exactly.
Look, mate, on that, we're going to wrap it up. I'll get you to stay on. I'm just going to pause the recording right now, but if you could stay on. Thanks, mate. And
Thanks,
to all the listeners of Northern Vibe, this has been a great conversation, and I know that you appreciate having Jeremy on.